welcome to a special roundtable edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. A fresh chapter, the 19th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, will take place in October, and that will determine who will run the world's second largest economy for the next 5 years. Now, the meeting is attracting extensive attention as China strives towards being an all-round, moderately prosperous society while developing a socialist system with Chinese characteristics in this critical period. What sort of leadership change and new policies can be expected during this meeting? What will changes to China's political agenda affect the rest of the world? From today, The Point with Liu Xin will begin our series of special coverage on the 19th National Congress of the CPC, the starting point. The first part will address the agenda and highlights of the meeting, as well as taking a look at the major changes which took place in China over the past 5 years in the political sphere. Joining me for the discussion are Wang Huiyao, Councillor of the State Council, Lawrence Bram, Founding Director of the Himalayan Consensus Institute, and Doris Nesbitt, the co-author of the best-selling book titled Creating a Megatrend. Welcome to The Point. Thank you very much for being with us here. Yes, it's a very serious, very big topic today, the 19th Party Congress, the most important on the political agenda. What can we expect for this once every 5-year meeting? Mr. Wang, you first.
Yeah, I think this is a great event that's going to happen in October, which is every 5 years. It's a big thing in Chinese political life. And so what we expect actually after this 5 years of the past 18th Parties Congress, we see China has taken a lot of progress. We see a lot of new changes. So for the 19th Party Congress, we expected more changes, more good things to happen, and also more livelihood of the people will be improved. And also we see China probably also the globalization will getting a new momentum, and we see that of course, there will be much more to enjoy with people, and then the economy will go even faster, and then more life will be changed.
Yeah. Well, China is a different system than most other countries in the world, right? We have this one-party system. So in terms of the importance of the National Congress of this one political party, how different is it from any other national congresses of any other parties in the world? I don't know.
Well, I don't think you can compare the National Congress with other systems. I think what is the fascinating thing for me is that if we look back, then the 20th century was driven by two things, free market and Western democracy. The 21st century, China has, you just mentioned it, created a new system, a new driver of wealth and progress, which is the efficiency of autocracy combined with the participation of democracy. So I think what's the really interesting to watch is the maturing process that we are watching in China, developing this very different system, a system that is walking on new ground and has way left walking in anybody's footsteps. And that's a very great thing for the world to watch.
Not just for China as well, but specifically, Lawrence, what are we expecting to come out of this party? What can be changed?
This party congress will be different from all the previous ones. The previous party congresses have focused mostly on internal, domestic economic policy and growth drivers. This is the first time that China is really stepping on the global stage, and in a big way. So a lot of the policies that are going to come out of this Congress will be focused on international policy, the Belt and Road Initiative, China's outbound investment, the future financial reforms that will lay the pathway for the globalization of the yuan currency, maybe even the yuan currency in the next 5 years becoming the next reserve currency next to the US dollar for many of the countries that are in the Belt and Road Initiative.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting that you have paid more attention to the external policies that China might be laying out, or the CPC might be laying out. But a very important development that came out, that the CPC will amend its constitution during the 19th National Congress. What's the significance of that, and what will be changed, Mr. Wang?
No, I think this is, yes, I think this is really something to be expected, because after those 5 years of great reform, particularly domestic reform, particularly you see the anti-corruption campaigns, you see how CPC trying to purify itself and self-sustain and self-criticism and actually purify to some extent. So I think a lot of new experiment, new development, new theory probably developed, probably particularly for the party has generated a lot of new ideas, new system, should be summarized and upgraded into the party charter. So I think that's probably, we're going to see a new, probably a new platform to become systematically to watch all those things happen under the radar for all those government behaviors, and also we're going to see a clean practice into the building into the party's charter, and then we're going to see more, the things that trying to get the party in line with the new objectives. For the last 30, 40 years, China was a lot of, the world looking inward China. China trying to attract foreign investment. Now China is starting to go global. And then this probably could be a landmark or turning point.
But in terms of President Xi, he has been seen in the West, for instance, as a very strongman kind of politician, right? But people starting to come to terms with his style, with the way how he is able to deliver, how he's determined to bring China forward in a certain path. How do you look at
I think we can't judge China only through the American or a few European media channels. We have to look at it from the way the rest of the world's seeing China. He has been driving forward policies of engagement with all of the underdeveloped and developing countries, outbound investment in these countries, and also investments into Europe. In many ways, Europe's own kickstart and resuscitation from the 2008 financial crisis is in large part due to China investment over the past 5 years. And so we really see someone who has taken the stage as a global leader. He is brought together the countries of the BRICS, the BRI countries. He is being seen popularly at home because of his very strong stance against corruption, which would really become a problem for common people's daily lives. From every single thing they had to do, you had to face a corrupt official. That is now being brought down. You also see an effort to close gaps between rich and poor, which is really very critical for social stability. Drivers of moving away from a consumption-focused economy to one of conservation, protection of environment. And so in this, we also see an effort to try and address terrorism at its root by focusing on economic development in underdeveloped countries and embracing identity of people rather than using force and military. So he's seen very popularly throughout the Third World, as well as among the general population in China. So I think he's looking forward to a very good term ahead of 5 years, and it's a great time for China to step onto the global stage and be a major driver in many affairs.
Yeah. And it's also important that there is continuity of stability and of the policies. You mentioned this wide-reaching anti-corruption campaign that, or anti-corruption action that has been going on over the past 5 years. Shall we take a look at this chart here? And here we're seeing some anti-corruption figures. That's from 2012 to May this year. We are seeing these numbers from the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection of the Communist Party of China. We have 4 columns. Those who violated central discipline, those who have been investigated, those who have been punished, and those who are notable high-level figures. So the highest number is, of course, the number of people who have been investigated, over 230,000. Those who are deemed to have violated central discipline, numbering 170,000, and some 200 people. Here we are talking about vice ministerial level officials who have been punished over the past 5 years. So indeed, I don't think we have seen anything like that, right, in the history of mankind. What is the importance of that?
I think this is really significant because for CPC, who has governed China for so many years, there's always a self-renew, self-innovation, and self-sustain. So how to find a solution to that is a challenge. I mean, frankly speaking, we've been, we've been seeing that in the past there's a lot of attempts to do that. And so I think under President Xi, he actually did this gracefully, and then he actually, for the last 5 years, systematically carried this and make now into a systematic approach. He have modified a lot of the system, has issued another new regulation. So this has been really contained the corruption widespreading in China, and then actually find a way to self-sustain and self-governing of this party. So I think this is very important with the CPC as the core, as the leading force. So you would expect high efficiency. You have also President Xi encouraged a lot of think tanks to give him different ideas, proposals, solutions. So it means there's a grassroots kind of democracy, supplementary roles to be played there. So all those leads to a much better, efficient, well-governed approach. So we hope that this is going to be summarized and proposed in the future.
Yeah. Again, I'm going to mention this because we do not live in an isolated world. There you have this thing that's called Western media. And they are saying, look, President Xi is not just using these activity to clear the party, to clear the country of corruption, but also purge his political rivals. What are the how do you respond to that, Doris?
Well, I would say that there is no power structure in the world where influence and power is not somehow connected, and where the people who are in power are not some who misuse the power. And so to fight corruption always includes to touch people who are in power. It's impossible, and it's not only limited to China. We were just having a discussion with some American friends, and who told us that corruption in other countries, and including my country, Austria, works in a different way. But of course, when you talk about corruption in political spheres, it does include people who are in a powerful position of some level. So that's just the nature of it. Mm-hmm. And without being able now to comment on certain cases, I think it's a very delicate matter, which if you look at how very well structured and strategically balanced the CPC is handling things, that we can trust that even if mistakes are sometimes made, nobody is flawless. It is a very smooth, seemingly cleaning process. Look at what happened in the 5 years. And, we sometimes do research in a funny way because we don't speak Chinese. When we meet people on the market, drivers, we just say, Xi Jinping. And it's very simple. Almost all of them come back
That's your market survey.
Yeah, because we want to just everyday people with whom we otherwise never would talk. You get a feeling about the climate in the country. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And just as Lawrence and you said, I think the CPC gets more accessible in a way.
Well, Lawrence, you wanted to add something?
Maybe I just try and put the anti-corruption campaign into a kind of historic perspective. In 1992, Deng Xiaoping said socialist market economy with Chinese characteristics, and it was the very first time the word market economy could be used in China. Officials didn't know what a market economy was, and then Deng Xiaoping said, get rich is glorious, and everybody did that. So basically, 20 years on, being a Communist Party official was synonymous with using power to get rich, and people were very angry about it. And so, the Communist Party was facing a crisis of credibility within China itself, with its own people. What Xi Jinping has done over the past 5 years is he's brought the credibility back to the party.
Great point. But again, if you look at these numbers, I didn't want to get rid of these numbers. If you look at the number is still quite big, right? We're talking about 230,000, and is that a problem that comes with a one-party system where you don't have an opposition party or two who are pointing, who are scrutinizing you non-stop?
You have an internal inspection system, and one of the things that we talked about with officials way back in actually the late 90s and the decade thereafter was the need to follow the Hong Kong model. Hong Kong had terrible corruption for many, many years, even under British colonialism, and the creation of the Independent Commission on Corruption really transformed it because it was an independent unit. And that is pretty much the model that's been adopted here. And yes, there's a long road to go, but now, even over the past few weeks, there have been anti-corruption campaigns against environmental abuses, which is very critical, unprecedented in this country. And you need to separate the structure. If you're going to be in business, you're in business. If you're going to be civil service, you have to have higher salaries for officials. They have to be competitive. You have to have higher salaries for all civil servants to make them willing to take that as a career, and a career without corruption. And when we talk about Western media criticizing China about corruption, look, in the United States now, we don't have a government. We have, under Trump, a family business.
Let's talk a little bit also about the army, which is very, very important, and supposedly President Xi is going to supposedly some important decisions will also be made during the 19th Party Congress. But first, let's listen to the soundbite from Chinese President Xi Jinping.
推进强军事业，必须毫不动摇坚持党对军队的绝对领导，确保人民军队永远跟党走。任何时候、任何情况下，都以党的旗帜为旗帜，以党的方向为方向，以党的意志为意志。
So basically, President Xi was stressing the absolute power the CPC has over the military. Again, how important is that for China?
Historically, that's what Mao Zedong said. Mao Zedong said the party controls the gun, not the gun controls the party. You have many countries where you do have military, have a coup d'etat. Look at Thailand. The military intervenes all the time and changes the politics. And so really, in order to have a stable political development, the party has to be in control of the military. And he's also promoted new generals. He's retired a lot of generals who were accused of corruption or who simply were not loyal to the system. And he's also changed the old system of regional military commands to break down alliances to local regions. Mao originally set that up with several command units that are regional as opposed to provincial. He's once again scrambled that to be able to create loyalty to the center rather than loyalty to regions.
I think under President Xi over the past 5 years, we've seen more dramatic changes in military than any previous leadership since the years of Chairman Mao. Mr. Wang, how do you think, what do you think is the rationale behind his drastic changes?
I think you probably can look at this in several different ways. First of all, China is a huge country. Historically, there are so many fractions, there are so many warlords and domestic civil wars and things like that. So you need a very strong leadership to govern.
Central leadership.
Yeah, central leadership to govern a country of the largest population in the world. Second, I think also China is getting more prosperous. So there's more to be defended. There's more security concerns. There's probably more on the alert that you know, because you look at the you know, North Korea, you look at all those things. So it's probably to have a strong you know, military and army to be a deterrent to the safety of the country. Thirdly, I think is that you know, it's also a Chinese tradition. There's a characteristic of China is like that for so many years. So we see a tendency of the party and the government integrated together, you know, more and more now. And the presidency, of course, it's kind of. So the party is strengthening its leadership, government is more tightly with the party, and then so that you know, that the military is the same thing. So we have this all you know, under the government, under the party, so that will be really more effective in terms of efficiency, in terms of command, in directions, and in terms of defense, if there is a crisis.
Well, some people are saying China is flexing its muscle quite a bit. You know, we've seen
unlike
several.
the U.S.
Yeah, well, it's said that President Trump also wants to have a military parade.
Of course,
but China has been doing several of these, right? I mean, the latest being in Inner Mongolia for the very first time, not on Tiananmen Square, but also sort of on a battlefield setting where you have a very different military parade. What are the considerations behind such moves, you know, to not just flex your military muscles, but also doing it in an even more dramatic way and more on-site fashion?
China has investments all over the world right now. It's a major global player. It's involved in all kinds of conflict prevention as well in order to reduce risks. The world is becoming increasingly volatile. We have a rise of all kinds of distorted situations right now in terms of North Korea is one example, but you have you know, ISIS is another. Syria, you have all over the world these crisis situations, and so China is looking out now to protect its own interests. It's looking to play a role. For years, the United States has been saying, oh, you should step up and play a role in terms of global security, and now it is. It's doing just that. It is going to play a role in global security. But I think we have to keep in mind that on one hand, while it's building a military strength and technology, it's going to be a high-tech military. To be able to do that, it is also coming in with policies of economic development and empowerment in local areas to try and avoid the types of crises. You cannot solve the world's problem only with military force. You also have to do it with economics and with sustainable development and environmental concerns. So it's a two-hand approach.
Yeah. And I think, you know, when you said flexing the muscles, yes, that's clear. But on the other hand, it's also a domestic confirmation. People also want the self-confidence of the Chinese has risen, especially, you know, beginning with 2008. It got a big boost. It got another boost in the past 2-3 years forward. And to have a visible thing of our own power, if I were Chinese, is also domestically not just, can be not brushed away. Mm-hmm. People want to be confirmation.
Yeah. But what does China have to do better in terms of communicating with the world, let's say, what it is doing over the next 5 years in terms of its military? Lawrence?
I've always said soft power is more powerful than hard power. I mean, that's even a basic principle of Chinese philosophy. Even in Kung Fu, it's the internal, what they call the internal gong, as opposed to the external gong, which is the more powerful.
Specifically?
And specifically, I think more efforts on work with climate, more work. China's, you know, becoming the world exporter of renewable energy systems. Along the Belt and Road, policies that will be able to help communities, empower communities. As you add infrastructure systems in, you also have to realize that some of that infrastructure will interfere with the environment. The creation of natural preserves, natural parks in the BRI countries. These types of commitments and these types of efforts will go very far in changing the perspective that the world has of China. And, of course, diplomatic efforts toward driving at peace. We have North Korea, but, of course, China has also become more active in the Middle East as a broker in conflict situations as to being one that actually intervenes and creates the conflict. The other thing is how to express values. You know, I talk to a lot of European diplomats, and they say, oh, we still have American values. Well, these days, we're not sure what American values are anymore. You have a right-wing fascist movement in America and a left-wing anti-fascist movement. What is American values? And I think the promotion of an Asian set of values that is really looking at harmony, peace, you know, shared prosperity, the balancing, you know, between what they call material civilization in China and spiritual civilization, a middle road approach, as opposed to just advocating Wall Street greed and seeing greed as an end value in itself. I think the development and evolution of an Asian set of values, not only by China, but China with the countries of Southeast Asia, South Asia, countries that have had a huge historical interaction with China. President Xi mentioned this in his speech at the opening of the BRICS summit in Xiamen. He said very clearly we need more people-to-people cultural exchange, and we need to build that up. So it's the Asian value conundrum that China needs to build.
Important. Mr. Wang?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things can be done to strengthen China, particularly on the soft power side. I think, you know, for example, we can attract more foreign students to come to study in China, because now China still has the lowest percentage of international students in China. and we can do more.
Not just students,
yeah,
talents.
and also
yeah.
talents, and also international. For example, we can attract more tourists come to China. For example, for the last 10, 15 years, China's international tourism, particularly the inbound of the foreign tourism, is actually flat. So we could invite more of that. And thirdly, I think we probably also should have more universities, collaborations, invite more universities to come into China to have campus, and Chinese university can go out as well, have campus outside China. And more than that, I think that people-to-people exchange is really key. We see the economic integration is really China is integrated, but people integration and more foreigners come to China, and we more actually how to better tell the China story. On the global governance, China should promote more regional, like RCEP, maybe FTAP, free trade agreement with Asia Pacific, and maybe play more role at the WTO, maybe play more role at international institutions, and set up, for example, I proposed for a long time, like World Talent Organization. There's no such organization, but we should have a new WTO for that to really facilitate the flow of talents around the world.
Think tank alliance.
As well, think tank alliance, absolutely.
Yeah.
China has a lot of think tanks. We have Chinese companies outbound, but we don't have a China think tank outbound.
Right.
So we should have more think tanks going
forward. Yeah, think tanks
That's where you
is
could
the brain of humanity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
we hope to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and Doris?
Yeah, well, I think, after all you said, I think you can also come down to the very practical thing of using what language do you use? What words do you use? There is no question that the way of expressing something, the way of explaining something to the world, to the Western world, sounds a little old-fashioned and sometimes, propaganda language. But there's so much that can be told in a different narrative. And I think that the way that China tells its story to the world needs also a real narrative that is a more modern narrative. And as you mentioned,
yes.
The talents, well, what we experience, China does so much more than the Western world. How much do we do? How many Chinese do we invite to learn from the Chinese? But the Western world is hardly aware of these programs, which are really great, which are eye-openers for the Chinese and then work again for the country. But you also have to make the world know things about you and know what you are doing to open up. It's not a country that closes down. It's a country that opens up increasingly.
Yeah.
But the language has to fit to the modernity of China.
Wow, indeed, a very important period of time, very important topic. China will have more stability, more prosperity, but again, we will integrate more with the rest of the world and will communicate in a way that is understandable and relatable to other people in the world. Fascinating topic. Thank you very much for joining us in this special roundtable discussion. Wang Huiyao, Councillor of the State Council, Lawrence Bram, Founding Director of the Himalayan Consensus Institute, and Doris Nesbitt, co-author of the book Creating a Megatrend. And that is it for this special roundtable discussion of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, follow us on Twitter or Facebook using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application CGTN Live to watch our show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. We've got The Point.